So I want to spend a few minutes talking about the summer season and identifying opportunities there and some of my thoughts on customer and staff satisfaction, the cost reduction opportunities, growth potential. And if you have any questions or you want more explanation or support for anything I talk about, just please let me know. But I do think we have a lot of opportunities with the summer season. But in general, I think Philmont has operated a really great summer season for decades, and my plan would be to continue that for the most part, with maybe some minor changes. I think there's some things we could do behind the scenes immediately to improve cost reduction and customer satisfaction. And then over the next couple of years, I think there's some opportunity there worth looking at. But in the short term, just operating a successful summer like we have done, I think that's really important to our brand consistency. And the strength of our brand is, I think, the history of how many people have gone through Philmont and experienced these high quality programs. And so maintaining that through some of the rough times that we've experienced, like COVID and the burns, the turnover in employment and the bankruptcy. So maintaining our brand strength through some of the challenges that we're facing. But I just think, one of the treks that I went on as a youth, there was a son, a father, and a grandfather all in the same trek with us. And so that was really special. And every time I see that out in the field, it's just really special because you get the sense for the longevity of our program and the sort of generational customer that comes back with their child. And it's just really special. So I think we're really tradition rich, but not necessarily tradition bound. I think, it's important that we maintain our traditions, but as we've seen, Philmont has evolved over time. And so not necessarily being bound by our traditions as we take a look on things like return of investment and safety and customer satisfaction and the customer experience as our market continues to evolve. But as we look towards the future, some of the immediate, just quick little opportunities, I think, is really right away digging into our backcountry warehouse and seeing how that's organized and what our supplies are looking like there, tracking our supplies and our needs and our usage so that we can budget sooner and look at our purchasing 12 months out instead of more of this on-demand purchasing like I experienced last time I was at Philmont. And then some other just low cost added value programming. I think there's some low hanging fruit to improve the customer experience at low cost and low staff needs. And then the other thing that I think we can do immediately is sort of move the timeline up on the itineraries. Itineraries are huge for the whole summer operation. And so spending more time in the fall to really work at that, look at our process there. And I know I talked about that in another video, move the whole timeline up. And those are some of the immediate improvements I think we can make. But as the next couple summers come along, taking close observations and notes and feedback about a few other things like our high cost, high risk programs, rock climbing and mountain biking and firearms, things like that. Just taking a close look to make sure that we're doing things safely and that we're really getting our money's worth or our risks worth or our staff time's worth out of that program. Or is there something else that we can use to have an equally good experience with the customers at reduced costs and reduced risk? So the next couple of summers, taking a close look at that, just assessing where we're at with that. And then looking at our return on investment on the things like staffing, facilities, vehicles, and safety. And yeah, starting with the highest risk, highest cost, and moving down from there. Over time, I think we'll gain better understanding of the customer experience all the way through their pre-arrival, the itinerary selection, the registration process, the paperwork. When they arrive, the duration of their trek. So when they arrive, their ranger training, their backcountry experience, their last day procedures. And then finally, when they depart. So getting that feedback, following up with them, talking about customer retention, keeping them in the pipeline, and looking at that. So that's how we can gain a better understanding over the customer experience in the next couple of years. And finally, just as far as growth is concerned, really opening the box there and just having some brainstorm ideas, leaving nothing off the table. And I think that's the best way to approach growth opportunities. Just let the brainstorm flow and then go at it from there, because it's amazing what you can come up with some of these brainstorm ideas. So that would be some of my short-term and long-term goals with the summer operation in the backcountry. As far as I'm concerned, since I've been a camp director, I've moved more from a program person into a numbers person. And I focus on the numbers all the time. How many participants is this going to affect, or what sort of revenue is this going to bring in, or what's the cost of this? And even today, my staff give me a hard time because they say, Keith, I thought you were a program person. You have all this program experience and you're talking about the numbers all the time. And what I tell them, and I'll show you here just proof that I am a program person. We go through budget training at Maine High Adventure, and I talk about the numbers so they understand the importance of my job, because I have to do my job so they can do their job. And their job is on the front lines of the customer. They're changing lives, and I need to be able to support them by focusing on the numbers. So just coming back to my experience, the mountaintop experience is a number one customer. The things that all the customers want is a mountaintop experience. So there's a young 14-year-old Keith. Mine. So my top three programs are the campfires, burrows, and the mine tours. Campfires, for me, that really is what dug through my soul. Philmont is about, and High Adventure in general is about the physical challenge, the teamwork challenge, the emotional challenge, then finally the spiritual challenge. And I think that the campfires is one way to really get in tune with somebody's spirit, and all the, in the darkness, all the things kind of fade away, and it's just you and the staff, and you're being transformed into this historical experience through the staff music, and it's transformative. So the campfires is my number one favorite program. I think it's really effective. It was for me. The mine tours, because of this mine tour here, this would have been my second trek. This changed the whole outlook of my studies. So when I got to university, I decided to be a geology major because of this mine tour. And this is one of those simple programs. You just need one staff member. When you go into the mine, you are transported back in time. And so one staff member can make a huge effect with the mine tours. At least it was for me. Here we are. We're at Harlan. This was maybe my first trek, so it would have been 13. The neat thing about Harlan is, yeah, the firearms experience is really neat. All our programs are really neat, but you can find better quality programs at camps across America. What makes them special is that you're doing it at Philmont, right, with your crew, and you're in the backcountry for this multi-day experience. And so at Harlan, the shooting the gun is neat, but the added value here is getting to pack your own shot. So going through you get to make your own shotgun shells and then shoot them. And I thought that was just so neat, because I'm from Texas. I shot lots of guns before I came to Philmont, but I'd never made my own shotgun shell. Then this is finally, I think this was right after Rayado, and I was here with my ranger. And just coming back to the fact that the ranger and the staff makes such a big impact for people. I know for me, after having this discussion and experience with my Rayado rangers, that's kind of, I don't think my brain knew it, but my heart knew it, that I knew that I was going to do this the rest of my life as my career. So I am a program person, but I got to focus on the numbers so that our program people can get out there and do their job and change lives. So I said I go through the budget training with my staff, but I also talk about what day in the summer do we start making money? So how much money do we spend before participants even arrive? And then what day in the summer are we going to turn things around so we can have a net revenue and hopefully cover any losses or depreciation? At Maine High Adventure, we didn't start making money until August 10th. And so throughout the whole season, my staff could see me getting visibly excited as we got closer to August 10th. But understanding that every impact to your budget before August 10th gets you further behind in achieving your net revenue. So you're kind of sweating all the way up until that point. And so I'd share that with my staff. In general, just a constant eye for return on investment. So obviously, when you're looking at a budget, your number one is payroll. And so always looking at staff, seeing what they do. There's a lot of payroll sitting around for multiple days or not serving the customer. Of course, you want your staff to be self-fulfilled and relaxed and have enough energy to do the program. So making sure they have their downtime, but also giving them a meaningful summer with work that's really going to stay with them for the rest of their life. So return on investment on that. I know at Main High Adventure, we really have a fragile program with slim margins. So I got rid of our cook. We just took turns as staff members. We signed up for meals, and it turned into a fun exercise of trying to find a neat meal and cook it. And some staff members were better than others, but that's part of, I think, life learning. That's something we do for crews, is learning how to cook on trail. So I got rid of our cook. And in the back of my head, I'm just thinking, at Main High Adventure, over the course of a summer, I'm paying a staff member $6,000. I mean, when you look at their take-home pay, the federal insurance, the workers' comp, the food, the uniform, all that stuff equals about $6,000 over the course of a summer. So I'm always comparing, is that cook worth $6,000, or can I buy $6,000 worth of frozen lasagna and serve that, for example? I know in the commissary staff, I reduced our commissary staff. The food is always a hot topic. How do you satisfy your customers, but also have food that's inexpensive and easy to prepare? And at Main High Adventure, we moved from more of a bulk food process to individual food, packaged food. So looking at risk, it moves us from food handling to just redistribution, packaged food already. There's benefits there. And ultimately, there's a little bit of cost extra too. I mean, bulk food is cheaper than the packaged food, but does it equal $6,000? And two, your commissary, if you're doing bulk food, your commissary person has to be more experienced. And so you're hoping for a returning manager there. And in our day and age, it's harder to get that returning staff. And so moving to the prepackaged food, I think we did end up saving, in addition to the $6,000 in staff, but constantly weighing your return on investment of payroll versus what can we do with that money outside of payroll. At Philmont, I think the backcountry warehouse staff is something that I'm going to look at. They come with a lot of value, but at the same time, what does that value equal? And just one small example, or can we make their job more effective? So one small example I'm going to share real quick is my first summer, we came in and I really made it a priority. So I got to my job, I said, great, what's my job? And there wasn't a manual, and that's nothing new for me, and I never expect a manual, but coming in and trying to figure out what my job is, and I'm digging through the files and trying to understand what's going on. But so part of that was going through the backcountry warehouse. And when I did that, let's see here, I realized that the backcountry warehouse could be organized a little bit better, and I think better suit our needs. So I'm just going to open up a window here. All right. So I came in, and like I said, I was digging not through multiple folders, not through multiple drives. I was digging through multiple servers, trying to just find camp directory reports or anything to let me know. Climbing, for example, what are your supplies? What do you need every year? What's your usage? Where's your training manual? And I just couldn't find it. It was just all over the place. It was really hard to find. I had to ask previous staff members and really do some hound dogging there to figure it out. So I've mentioned this a few times, but I made great efforts to organize all this and scan paper things and put them into a meaningful system so that now I have this cloud-based sharing system. This was pre-COVID, by the way. So when COVID came along and we had to find ways to share this information with our staff virtually, I was already prepared. But I organized it not just by program, but also by camp. So we'll just go into climbing, for example. So we got the camps, and I've talked about it before, and I'll talk about it briefly, but you go into each camp and you have their most recent CD manual, their maintenance maps, their workflow analysis, and some of those helpful things. But coming back to the backcountry warehouse. So backcountry warehouse, that first summer, I was just digging through the whole warehouse, just to see what's there. and it was a little bit disorganized. It was climbing stuff in 3 or 4 different places. It was mixed in with different gear for different programs. There was retired gear. And we found these 4 spools of rope back up in a corner. And after looking at the manufacturer's recommendations and the BSA policy and things like that, we realized that these 4 spools of rope were going to expire at the end of that summer. So if we hadn't have found those 4 spools of rope, they would have expired. We would have had to retire them. Just brand new spools of rope, we would have had to retire. And so, it talks about your inventory management and rotating your inventory and stock, but then just knowing where your stuff is. So, so let's see what that would have equaled. And we do have the backcountry warehouse staff. And what I'm getting at is in the off season, we have the backcountry warehouse staff do the inventory. And I feel like in my time there, they're kind of going through the motions. They write it on a piece of paper and stick it on the program supply box. But if you're not doing anything with your inventory, then it doesn't have value, and you've wasted that staff member's time. And if we had better inventory records or understanding, we would have known this rope existed. But let's just see here. Gear inventory. So I started developing these spreadsheets. Also in here, you'll notice we did this big climbing room storage project where, just organizing it, making sure that we're buying the exact things that we need. I reached out to multiple camp directors. We were measuring things down to the half inch. We found really great resources just in storage with the action packers that Derek had in the pole barns, and then finding things that were worth the investment to organize our spools, measure our rope, and cut our rope effectively. So that's one, but and then also, just other sources of funding. So after we did this, I'll open this up. The spreadsheet made us much more capable and flexible to ask for money, to see what our purchases were and our needs were, and tracking our usage. But let's just go in here. We'll find spools of rope. So this spreadsheet, talks about your notes and your needs and the estimated total cost. And so really at the end of the summer is when you need to update this. And it's so hard to put in that extra work at the end of the summer. But if you're prepared at the end of the summer, at least with, your overall numbers, you might not know your exact crew numbers per camp, but in general, a lot of your needs. And so at least having those penciled in at the end of the summer, you're prepared for, if you need to get some, if you have more money in the budget and you spend something quick, you can, or if you get a donation. But I'm just going to quickly go in here. All right, so let's look at rope. Here's some static rope. We'll click on this link here. Or let's see, we'll copy this. Let's see what the value of this rope is and weigh that against the cost of our backcountry warehouse staff. Oops. There we go. So backcountry warehouse staff probably spend, I don't know, at least a couple of weeks, maybe even longer. You have 2 staff members doing this. It might cost $2,000 to do the inventory. So that summer, let's see, 11 millimeter rope, and we're looking for, we'll see this. And our rope, I think we get 200 meter rope. So there you go. All right, so 200 meters, 11 millimeter, $400 per spool. So that was 400 times 4 spools. That equals $1,600 that we would have lost on rope. Brand new rope we would have had to cut up because we didn't know it existed in the backcountry warehouse. So it just goes to show you the cost of the cost of not having an organized backcountry warehouse and not tracking your inventory and your needs and your usage, and the benefits to doing that. And so in this case, looking at your return on investment and your staffing needs, if it costs $2,000 to do your inventory every year, but the inventory isn't effective and you're losing $1,600 in spools of rope, making sure that we're getting our money's worth for that payroll. So that's some of the sort of numbers comparison that I'm looking at. All right, I think immediately in the next summer, looking at the backcountry warehouse, and the time to look at your backcountry warehouse is in the peak of the season when all your materials are in the field. You get a sense for what you have in inventory, the things that are covered in dust that you might not need, or like our telescopes. We had a dozen telescopes, and Ring Place only needs like 2 or 3. And some of the telescopes are in disrepair or broken, or they're not very good, or they were like the white elephant gift that has no purpose, but you still hold on to it. It takes up space. But some of the telescopes were there and available, and so we were able to farm those out to the PTC, to other David's Lake down south, and so other programs could take a telescope and use that as sort of an added value program to their primary program. So in the peak of the summer is when you look at your backcountry warehouse and assess what you can designate for use, what will never serve a purpose but has value, and maybe you can donate it or sell it, or what's retired or what's broken and just needs to be destroyed or thrown in a dumpster. So the peak of the summer, I think we can do that in this first summer very easily, very quickly. Something I wanted to do before, and the initiative just wasn't there. So bringing that back to the table and looking at that. In addition to the backcountry warehouse staff, return on investment of backcountry staff and managing those staff resources effectively. So in 2019, after the fires and the big changes, I used an algorithm to assess what our likely needs were going to be for the backcountry camps. And that let me reduce our cook at Cimarroncito, for example, and understand that sometimes your crew loads don't always reflect your staff needs. And so some of the camps like climbing and the gun camps, you have to have higher staff ratios because of your NCAP accreditation and other requirements. And so then looking at your crew loads and your staff needs, and maybe we try to mitigate the itineraries to better utilize our fixed costs with the staff, or alter the program. So, Chase Cal, for example, we had climbing, but then we added the bouldering, which requires one less staff member to stay in the payroll. And there's all sorts of other benefits. I think I talked about it in another video, but looking at your backcountry staff and making sure that you're utilizing that payroll effectively. And a lot of it just comes back to moving the timeline earlier for itineraries so you can identify those needs and pinch points sooner. Abreu is another one where Abreu, you have a huge number of crews passing through, but you don't necessarily need a lot of staff. And so understanding that sometimes you can have a great program without having a lot of staff, even if you have a high pass-through rate. And I know for me, I'll talk about it, but I said music is my favorite program. Well, probably the most impactful music experience I had at Philmont was when we were going through Black Mountain Camp, and there was only one staff member there. I don't know if they're understaffed or on a hasty, but it was just the camp director left. And that evening, he set us around the campfire and he just played his guitar, and he played sort of period time songs and really transported me back with the smoke and the atmosphere and the smell of the blacksmith. And that was the most effective musical program, one of the most effective programs I had as a participant. It was just one staff member. So you can do a lot with one staff member. And I always come back to the tennis ball that one of my COPE staff told me about. I was asking her about our COPE needs and what can we do to make it better. And she just held up that tennis ball and she said, "Keith, you can make a great program with just this tennis ball. You don't need all the fancy stuff. It's the staff member that's facilitating it." And that just really put it in perspective for me. So understanding that as well when you're looking at your backcountry payroll. Backcountry staff and effectiveness, the return on investment. Roving prospectors was another one. I love the idea. Like I said, I'm a program person at heart, but I'm also numbers focused and safety focused. And the roving prospectors, as interesting as that program was, I supported them moving into the camps and rotating through a specific camp as on their staff, because when they're up in Baldy country, for example, and the French Henry staff is running hasties up and over to Greenwood Canyon and they're exhausted and they're trying to do program, that's where the roving prospectors need to be so that they can respond to those safety incidents, or they can facilitate program when the rest of the staff is exhausted. And so putting, understanding the neat things of the program, but looking at the big picture and seeing that maybe staying with the staff is a better place for safety and staff satisfaction and staff fatigue. Interdepartmental collaboration and teamwork. So looking at backcountry staff and how can we work with other departments, there's some synergy there. And I think breaking down the walls and having more communication between departments can also improve our overall customer experience, but then our payroll too. And I proposed in 2019, looking at our hunting lodge staff, they definitely did a good job. They did a really good job of, the tours. Some crews just aren't into that. They want to pass through without going on a tour. So they're really good about capturing that and then adding these secondary programs. Like they started making biscuits, and that turned into this huge, like all the participants were really into the biscuits, and you heard that comment propagate throughout their trek. I'd be up at Sawmill, and the kids were talking about those biscuits they had at Hunting Lodge. So definitely opportunity there. But I said, hey, we got our visiting foresters. We also have a lot of conservation in that area. Maybe that camp could better serve Philmont by having conservation work on staff there, fill the minimum staff requirements for emergency response with the visiting foresters. Yeah, have 1 or 2 staff members dedicated to historical interpretation, but utilizing that camp to support the conservation efforts and the visiting foresters, because it's such a great area of the ranch to do that. So it's important that we share the history of Wade Phillips and the historical parts of our program, but looking at some more collaborative efforts with other departments, I think, is a way to reduce our payroll, but also improve the customer experience. Scalable staff, the BSA has gone from 3 million youth registered members to all the way down to 1 million. So that's 66% decrease in the last 20 years. So understanding that our market is shrinking, and then looking at our fixed costs, so our payroll more than anything, and understanding how we might be able to scale those fixed costs based on the demand. And what I'm talking about, I've mentioned in a couple of videos, for example, the taper at the end of the season, as we have less crews at the end of the season, being able to scale our staff that way, looking at end dates and how we can, and I call it the 50,000 idea. I've mentioned it a few times now, but improve safety, improve a lot of things, but also save $50,000 and open up part of the ranch for growth potential. So that's what we're going to look at. But scalable staff, also too, just general scheduling of our ranger staff and our backcountry staffs. Should we be more flexible throughout the summer if we have sort of a peak throughout the summer? I mean, you want a nice flat customer arrival. You want 30 crews or 20 crews arriving per day, 30 crews, 40 crews arriving per day, every day. But in reality, you usually have a pretty quick ramp up. There's definitely a peak in there. And then August, you have a taper. That northern tier, definitely more of a peak in July. And so that scaling our staff accordingly was very important. So in the peak, I would bring in guest interpreters. They're only there for 1 trip or 2 trips, and they take off the peak, and then I save from having to hire a staff member for the whole summer. But one really creative cost savings I did when I was the HR manager and I was recruiting all the staff and struggling with start dates was another one, as high schools were graduating or things like that. I saved $40,000 simply by looking at our schedule, realizing that the first 4 days of our customer arrival, our crew arrival, looking at the first 4 days, all I needed was like 10 staff members to cover those first 4 days. And so instead of having all staff arrival and then late staff arrival, I just had 10 staff arrive early, and then they were able to cover those first 4 days of cruise. And then I can start 200 staff 4 days later. And oh, by the way, you save $40,000. So kind of looking at those sorts of unique scheduling and things like that to scale our staff and save money that way. Also, I mean, when you have 200 staff for 4 extra days sitting on base, you can have all sorts of great projects for them, and you can make it meaningful. But that's a lot of staff just sitting around base, and when staff are sitting around base and they have sort of minor projects, then you're looking at maybe some goofing off and things like that. But Okay, so that's scalable staff, but also going back to the interdepartmental opportunities and teamwork and big picture. I submitted a proposal in like 2018, but I think it's worth looking at again, just to take a look at our special treks. I've managed the special treks. I've designed and created special treks, the Forest Corps at Northern Tier, Leave No Trace. We're looking at an OA trek at Main High Adventure right now. Um, I've run them. I've run them as a manager. I've managed their staff, and I've also been the staff person in the field. I've been an OA foreman. I've been an environmental educator, and so I know it from all parts of the program. But is there some opportunity there for strategic scheduling and filling our individual treks? Some of them really struggle to fill their participants. One example is just looking at your STEM treks and your rocks treks. So STEM is a 2-week program geared more towards the STEM focus. And then rocks is more of a 3-week program steered more towards the conservation. But there's a lot of overlap there, right? So right now, I think they're staggered arrival dates, but hey, why don't you just go ahead and start them both on the same day? And that way, if you're looking at them not filling up, well, if they start on the same day, then you do have an opportunity to just combine them both together and you're saving on your staff. And oh, by the way, that's your 21 and up staff. So that's definitely hard to get. And you want those people for your managers usually. And if you're doing STEM and rocks at the same time, that's like 4 21 and up year olds in the field. It's a lot more resources to support and logistics. And so start them on the same day. And if you need to, or you can, just combine them together. Your STEM trek lasts for 2 weeks. That's the first 2 weeks of the rocks trek. And it is more STEM focused. And then after that, that last week of the rocks trek is when you really go hard on the rocks things that are not related to STEM. And so now it's a win-win in a lot of ways. Your program is better when you fill up a crew. It's just the program is more impactful and meaningful when you have more people contributing to it. And then your staff resources, obviously there's just a huge savings there. And then you're not struggling to fill those positions or understaffed when you're having to send your manager out to take care of that trek. So call it the STEM rocks trek. But on your website, you can sell them both separately, but just start them on the same day, just in case. And so looking at our special treks and how we can do that. And then just coming back to the payroll savings, looking at our meetings, especially in the off season, the itinerary meetings is one example. And I just remember sitting in that room and counting, that was probably $1,000 in payroll just sitting in that room, not to mention the efforts to coordinate schedules and the work that had to be done, by each individual at their own office. And so I think that especially my strength in itineraries, we wouldn't have to have as much payroll and effort in the off season to coordinate all those schedules and the extra communication and going back and forth. And we found, in my other video, I just talked about some questions and observations with the itineraries that maybe it was intentional, but I think there's also some misses there. And understanding how many people were involved in that, I think there's actually more opportunity for mistakes. And so just looking at the whole itinerary process and just seeing what we can do there. But payroll savings would be one advantage. Okay, so summer and improvements and consistency and growth opportunity, but moving the itinerary timeline earlier. And that helps you, once again, just look at your budgeting and your program supplies. Things like tomahawk handles and tomahawk targets, that was a consistent failure of the backcountry when I was there. And it was just really disappointing. And I felt like we were just doing our poor staff in the field a disservice. We expect them to be the customer service person out in the field on the front lines. And now we're not supporting them as good as we could. And tomahawk handles and targets, we're going to need them, or we're going to use them. They're not perishable. They're not going to expire. So getting ahead of that need, you can even order 2 years on the road. Maybe you get a better pricing in bulk. And so you just go ahead and order 2 years at a time. But some of those items, but those are some of the observations I had from before that I wouldn't let happen, because that keeps me awake at night. And And I want to make sure that those staff are supported so that when there is something that happens, they can better handle that, and we can have like a feedback session from there. And like I said, just doing all this at the end of the summer, 12 months out, penciling it in and having it available is the best time to do it. And it's hard to do, but here's one example of why that's important. This was during the bankruptcy, I believe, and so here we go, right here. So it's the bankruptcy. We were going to go bankrupt, and so we had to know our needs and our expenses. And so Shelly said, I need to know what you're going to spend all, for next year. This is over 12 months out. And so May 29th, 2020, I was able to give her budget projections for 2021. And so because of that spreadsheet work that I had done, I could focus on our highest cost programs and our needs there, and not just guess it, but an itemized list of exactly what we were likely going to need. And so that's just one example of my previous efforts and how I would continue that with total ownership and responsibility for the backcountry. Now, talking about program and offering the program that everybody expects, but also maybe reducing our promise to the customer. You want to make sure to promise them some basic items, but in the itinerary, I talk more about some opportunities here. But sports action shooting versus horseback riding. Maybe just say you have time for one or the other on the itinerary. And I know we put a little asterisk there that says we're going to tell you everything. You might not get to do everything, but we're going to put it all on there. Well, I think you're still setting an expectation for the customer that's unrealistic, because you can tell them in person, you can tell them in the literature, but they're still, because they read it there, they're gonna justify it, and they're gonna think, oh, I can do that. That asterisk is for everybody else, but not me. And so using the itineraries to strategically mention that, reducing the program promises, the crews are going to come to Philmont whether you have that one more program or not. They're committed whether you say sports action shooting and horseback riding or one or the other. That's not going to change their decision to attend Philmont, but it does give you more opportunity. And with the staff, I go through a training session called Delivering the Magic. We talk about setting customer expectations, under promise, over deliver, going the extra mile, and it's like about the little things. But so if we under promise our program, well, now the staff have the opportunity, if things are going great, they can go above and beyond for the participants, and the participants weren't expecting it. And so now you've just magnified their experience and their satisfaction, versus the opposite. If the staff have gone on hasties, but they read it in their itinerary, even with that little asterisk where you can say, well, we didn't promise it to you, but they were expecting it. So reducing our program offerings and the promises, and having room for the responding to hasties, for the staff fatigue and burnout when they have just a really busy schedule, and they're delivering the promises that we make to the customers, and we're undercutting them sometimes by pushing them to burnout and fatigue, and that's when you get safety issues. But then also giving them time too to check their AOR. Sometimes they're so busy they don't have time to go check their AOR, and making sure that everything in their AOR is okay. And then just coming back to the, getting up early is important for some things, like avoiding weather, hiking in the cooler parts of the day. But now we've used it as a crutch and I've seen it on Facebook too. And luckily our Philmont, our brand is so strong that our Philmont customers support Philmont all the time on Facebook to our benefit, but maybe at some point that'll turn around. But understanding that now we're using get up sooner. I see it on Philmont all the time. If you want program, you got to get up early, meaning that if you get up early and get there and sign up for program, somebody else is going to miss out on program. So that is an issue with our program capacity, not with our program. So when they use get up early, get up sooner as the need for getting program, that's where we have failed. And so So I think under promising will reduce people getting up early. And I think I discussed it in a different video, the negative impacts of crews trying to get up super early and rushing to camp and missing out on some things. And one other thing I thought of is when they do that, they leave garbage on the front porch because the staff isn't getting up at 4 a.m. They were up till midnight doing a campfire. And the staff are really gracious a lot of times by having the trash available for them. But sometimes crews, they do it inappropriately or they miss it, and it opens up just an opportunity for animal issues with that. But when crews get up super early to get programmed, they leave garbage on the porch and some other things I'll talk about in a different video. So reducing the program, but being able to deliver the magic as a result. And also coming back with some of those added value programmings and passive programmings and low cost programs that don't require extra staff. So they can have program even when the weather rains them out of rock climbing, for example. But if you're interested in some of those customer service pitfalls that I feel like I've identified with the itineraries for this summer, you can check the video on that. And once again, I did that very quickly, so I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure there's some opportunities for customer service failures there. I've slept at every camp. I've participated in every program as a youth, as a participant, as a staff member. So I feel like I really understand what makes the impact. You know, when I was 13, I was impacted, and when I was a staff member, you know, anytime you can bring tears to somebody's eye, or when they ask for more cope, you know you're doing it right. And so I feel like I know how to generate that customer experience. And you think about program, and I'm a program guy, so you got to keep yourself in check for program creep, wanting to do more program, or you got these great ideas and you want to like, oh, that'd be really cool, let's do that, before really assessing the impact and the cost. And I always think about BSA High Adventure and how somebody at Northern Tier or Maine High Adventure can have the same impact on them as Philmont, because BSA High Adventure isn't just about the program, it's about the whole experience. And so at Northern Tier, there's no program. The staff members with them the whole time, and that's great, but there's no defined program. And so understanding that adding program isn't necessarily going to be more or less impactful to the participant experience, comparing it that way. And I think one way to prevent that program creep is, I showed in another video our 5-year plan for geology that I had come up with. And I think having a 5-year plan for every program and every camp, engaging your experts in the field, I call them, your camp directors that are on site every day, getting the feedback, doing the program, having them and the backcountry managers collaborate on a 5-year plan that they include in the digital resources so that you can build the program, you can capture that progress, and then the next year you can continue moving forward with the 5-year program plan that way. And so I did it with a couple programs, the high cost, high risk ones, geology, but continuing to develop the 5-year plans for each camp and each program. And that's another way that you can really cultivate leadership and professional development within your staff. You know, a lot of our staff, they want to do this for a living. And so it's important. That's why I added the NCAP standards to all their crew folders, and the you know, the incident reporting and things like that. So supporting the staff growth, being able to give them these tools to maybe use them for an internship support. You know, like business majors, it's hard to justify just by the job description. But when you talk about all these things like budgeting and compliance and team management, that's easily workable into an internship for a business major, for example. And then also being able to build those tools and skills and take it one step further. You know, if they develop the 5-year plan, staff recognition, staff retention, keep them engaged in that 5-year plan. I know as I was going through the fishing, for example, I'd engage all the back, you know, 6 previous camp directors of fishing or climbing, or mountain bikes was another one. I reached back multiple camp directors, but other opportunities there for collaboration, not just within the Philmont world, the BSA, maybe the staff alumni, but also local resources. So our Ring Place camp director and the ACD, trying to engage them at the end of the season. We had all these telescopes that were broken. We're looking for new ideas to just make that program a little bit deeper and find ways to develop the program and really fill it out for the customers. And so I found a group in Albuquerque that is they do astronomy and telescopes, and I took the camp director and the ACD because I'm trying to retain them and keep them the ACD, you know, hoping they come back as camp director. And if they're involved in these upgrades, well, you're more likely to make that happen. But they're also the field experts, and so we took all our telescopes and their ideas, and we went to this meeting in Albuquerque, and it was a way for them, if this was their career path, a way for them to meet experts in the field, to engage in a meaningful pursuit. And it's a lot easier for me to recruit volunteers when they hear about the impact from the camp director, from the people with boots on the ground. That's when the excitement really, you know, to talk to the heart, you have to talk from the heart. And they can do that a lot better than I can when they're talking about astronomy. So just lots of benefits there, cultivation and the 5-year plans and things like that. But getting more for your payroll, and you know, the best staff recruitment is staff retention, and the more staff you retain, it's safer, higher quality program. Training goes a lot smoother. There's just lots of benefits to retaining that staff. As far as the cultivation, listening to your staff ideas, and sometimes they're so goofy and funny, and sometimes they're saying them as a joke, but they wouldn't be saying them if it wasn't like a kernel of belief that there's something worth pursuing there. And so giving affirmations when you get ideas and making sure that you are rewarding that behavior, because your staff are nearest in age to your customers. And so they know the customers better than you do. Once again, they're boots on the ground every day with those customers. They hear conversations, they have the porch talks and the evening talks with the advisors, and they get the authentic feedback in the field in the moment. But also, oh, by the way, they were a participant last year or 2 years ago. So young staff members, they're the ones that are going to have the ideas that are going to carry us forward. So we're all getting old. We have ideas, but it's harder and harder to be relevant and understand your audience. So really using them and taking their ideas and giving them feedback and guidance and barriers and talking about things like cost and safety and risk management, and then you're building them and they feel empowered, they feel owned, they feel like you're really contributing to their success and listened to. And I think that's, I know for me, that's how I get a lot of loyalty and continued efforts to, I had an architect that was my assistant director. He has a degree in architecture. And I said, hey, you with this degree, you want to build a, we don't have like we don't have any sort of spiritual religious place on base. And so why don't we look at a spot for maybe you can have this outdoor place where we can have religious programming. And sure enough, that keeps him engaged to this day, even though he's now an architect. And so there's lots of wins there with engaging your staff and cultivating their ideas and pursuing those. Too, for those side programs, low cost programs, yoga at Head of Dean was really popular one year. And it's not the program, it's the staff member that makes it enthusiastic. And so that they just had a really enthusiastic staff member, and everybody got into the yoga thing that year. And so those side programs are really good. Juan Lopez. So Juan Lopez, and this comes back to identifying problems and solutions and leaving everything on the table. So just brainstorming ideas. But Juan Lopez is an idea guy. He is super creative, and he comes up with lots of fun ideas. So I went to his camp, and Cito normally is overwhelmed with people, but after the burn, we saw way dramatically less crew loads. And so the meadow at Cito was just overgrown. I mean, you were losing participants in the meadow. And so Juan said, hey, Keith, can you get us a goat? And I said, I don't know, Juan, why do you say that? And so he went on to describe the problem and how the goat was a chance to talk about, you know, leave no trace and eco-friendly solutions. And it was really well thought out. And, you know, we didn't get a goat that summer, but I left it on the radar and I still remember it today as an option. So thank you, Juan Lopez. But Goats at Cito is one example of sort of the solutions and programs and listening to those ideas by your staff. Some other low-cost programs, once again, to reduce the burden on your staff at camps and maybe offer fewer staff camps and more trail camps. by providing the passive programming. I think I mentioned earlier, but the Ranger Trail Camp program guide of things that a troop can do at a trail camp that's really meaningful and really builds on their customer experience at a trail camp. But spiritual programming is an easy one to add to every single camp. Looking at adding just some quiet reflection hours for spiritual programming, because in the backcountry to me, it's the easiest way to meet your maker and understand that there is a higher power at work. And so building that into your daily schedule, I think, has really meaningful impact on your participants. But it also ensures that there is downtime for your staff, and that you're maybe reducing the specific program elements, but you're increasing the program quality at that camp by the spiritual programming, using your volunteers, chaplains at the camps, but also other volunteers at the camps. Adding programming to your commissary camps. So when I was there, we added fishing. That's an easy side program that's very easy to manage at PJ. And we also looked at adding some sort of America themed program. I thought of just handing out constitutions at PJ, and it sounds interesting, but talking about the American Constitution, how it's a document that every citizen should read the Constitution and know it by heart. And I know that we could get a donation for constitutions to hand out at PJ, and so that was on the table. Didn't really pursue it yet, but then they have that constitution, and they can read that at the trail camps. That can be part of the trail camp programming. But at PJ, we did add the fishing and other programs at your commissary camps that the staff don't have to do any extra effort to. It's low cost. Just keeps the kids near the retail sales, which they're buying snacks and things. Understanding the importance of retail sales in the commissary camps. I always talk about the candle that I bought and how that memento was something I bought, but it had a lot of meaning for me in years after that. But your safety, your hacky sacks and frisbees, there's lots of retail opportunity there, and it's important that our staff understand the importance of that in the backcountry. Other things, kites at Dan Beard. We added kites to Dan Beard because it's windy there, and sometimes the cope is crew doesn't have time or the effort to do cope. Well, let's go fly a kite, and while we're doing that, we can have a discussion. I mentioned the astronomy telescopes, passing those out to other camps. Garcia Cow, so I came up with a program for Garcia Cow. I wasn't responsible for carrying out the program, but my program idea was another low cost but multiple benefit program. So I knew that the Cabela's had given us a lot of money, and they wanted to have sort of a conservation-based program effort. I also know that we had gotten rid of the Seton Museum, which really celebrated the history of Philmont, and we got rid of that in favor of the National Museum. And so there's two opportunities there to develop into a backcountry program that's unique. It's not anywhere else in the country. And so for Garcia Cow, I came up with a program that would celebrate conservation and the Cabela's, as well as the Seton Museum, and continue that legacy. So some benefits there. I think there was some wins there, but I think also the customer feedback wasn't as strong as other camps, which maybe comes back to having equal quality across all your camps. Because if they're going from Apache, where it's a super awesome, well-developed program with a lot of resources, and then they jump up to Garcia Cow, well, just comparatively, they're going to have setting the customer expectations with that. So not putting too many resources into one camp, and then looking at your itineraries so that they're not going from you have an equal quality of program from camp to camp. But another one, super low-hanging fruit that I wanted to do, and it didn't get done, but wearing the BSA uniforms at Zastro, that's just another the historical uniform. So Zastro had the historical BSA element to their program. Dave said we had a ton of old, lots of people were donating uniform parts to the museum, and so we had a lot of those in inventory. So hey, why don't we go ahead and put those into use, and more crews will get to experience those museum pieces in real life in the field. You'll be able to transport those kids back in time with the BSA program, and hopefully more crews will actually want to participate in that program as a result. So that's just a couple low-cost opportunities there. So coming back to retail sales, Main High Venture, just retail sales. Once again, we doubled our retail sales at Main High Venture my second year. So 2 years ago, we doubled our retail sales, just some minor improvements, and it enhances the customer experience. Okay, passive and self-facilitated programs. So these are programs that require zero extra effort or program supplies from the backcountry. So I mentioned the Ranger trail guide program guide for trail camps. Well, have you ever been to when I was 5 years old, I went to the Grand Canyon and I got my Ranger award for picking up trash with the Grand Canyon. They had that special program for little kids. Well, maybe we do a Philmont Ranger Award where they work on just requirements. And I think we might have done this when I was there, actually, something like this. But they work on the requirements for this sort of Ranger Award at the trail camps, and it gives them something to do. And then, they get like a free patch at the end, or they get a patch that they can pay for at the end. I mentioned the spiritual programming. I tell all my Rangers this, but all my trail staff is to build that hour of reflection time and spiritual programming into the day. One, just to have a quiet hour, but it's important that you delineate that into the schedule. Otherwise, kids are not going to do that on their own volition. So I wish I had more written experiences when I was on trail. And so I think it's really worth specifying that into the daily routine of every crew. I know when I was on Rayado and we had our solitude time, that was just really impactful for me. And that sort of changed my life, is just that solitude on Rayado. We already do a lot of this, the improvements to our trail peak and our cemeteries. That's some great passive programming. Self-facilitated programming could also be an opportunity for recapitalization and donor cultivation efforts. Offering the trail peak plaques, for example, but having a donor come in to do that. Somebody with a personal stake there that they want to give to the ranch, and doing it that way. Another one that I have, so I'm going to share this one that I did. This is something I did. So in 2011, I was on a day off, and I did a geologic hike through time. It turns out if you hike from Old Abreu to Crags, you walk through nearly all of Philmont's geological history. And so you can make just a little handout, maybe sell it in the trading post, but a very simple thing that you can walk somebody through and say, hey, where you are standing today was once a beach, or dinosaurs roamed the earth, or there was a volcano. Look to your right, you'll see a volcano. And so so I did that in 2011. That's a great opportunity for passive programming as they're making that hike. And that way, if they don't have time to do programming, or they're getting to fish camp late, or they're just stopping at Crags, it gives them something to do along the way. It's enhances their experience without any cost to us, and maybe even a slight benefit to retail sales if you make it like a nice looking pamphlet. And so let's see, going through here. That's me on Baldy with my 2 sledgehammers that I used to hike around in. But my old Ranger commented on this. He said, quite possibly the most boring Philmont photo album ever. So obviously not everybody's take, but you can make it interesting. It's at least something there for crews to do if they want. But this is my Philmont Ranger. Coming back to the passive programming and the impact that staff make. It's not about the program, it's about the delivery. And so when he wore this on trail, it was very impactful. And so once again, the historical uniforms as Astro was an idea as a result of my old Ranger doing this. But stuff like this, going the extra little effort, bringing the magic is how you make that Philmont experience. I know for me, that one really poignant, I got a thank you letter. There was a crew advisor that came in with an inner city group, and he said, yeah, we want to send thank you. This is after the advisors meeting in the parking lot, which is another great place for ideas, by the way. But he said, hey, do you have any Philmont letterhead that we can have? We want to write thank you notes to our our donor back at home. These are all inner city kids. They don't have any money, and somebody from the council donated money so they could come to this experience. And I said, follow me, sir. And we went in the office, and I got him letterhead. I gave him envelopes. I gave him all the things that he would need to let those kids write those thank you letters. And I even sent those letters back home to his council for him. So I guarantee you that made the experience. That's what we do at Philmont, customer service. So that's some of the passive programming, self-facilitated programs, low-cost programs, just doing more with less. So not just trying to save money and offer less, but doing more. So it's a win-win. Find those win-win opportunities at Miners Park. Redirecting our volunteer efforts. We were going to work on Dan Beard, their aging cope and climbing course, but then looking at our participant numbers, we decided to move forward with Miners Park and really redo that climbing wall so we could fit five times as many crews under an overhang. So now you can do it in inclement weather. But then also using facilities in place. So our facility use and knowing, I'm anti buildings because buildings are expensive. But we have some areas where we have facilities that are being underutilized. So also not just looking at where maybe we need to build something or a yurt as I did in Chase Cal and Garcia Cal, understanding our resources, knowing that there's an extra yurt laying around and putting that into play instead of having to build a building. So yurts over buildings is definitely worth thinking about as we're looking at a declining market. A building is something permanent, and you have to have constant maintenance, and there's all sorts of trickle down costs there year after year. If we're looking at potentially shrinking participant numbers, before deciding to build a building quickly, let's go ahead and use a yurt, and then long term, if we feel like a building's necessary, we'll do it. But I'm really against buildings just because they're a huge cost and maintenance, and I don't think they necessarily have a return on investment. But at Miners Park, though, and a couple other places, Clark's Fork is another one. There's an old shower house. It was an eyesore. It hurt our image because it was just an abandoned shower house. And so very quickly, being able to turn it into an inclement shelter. So crews can just come in here, have a quiet place to sit. Maybe this is a good place for staff to instruct crews on a harness use, or maybe watch participants as they're climbing on the wall. So some very basic at cost. And oh, by the way, we found the lumber and things like that were already in-house. We weren't having to purchase more supplies. So all the supplies were there. It was a very easy thing to do. The building was there. So a win-win on lots of levels. So doing more with less on that. There's a shower house at Clark's Fork right now, and I guarantee you it probably is still standing there unused. And that one might be a harder one to come up with, but it's really easy just to transform it into an inclement shelter for crews. But so that's one. And then, oh yeah, just I talk about this in a different one, but the mobile cope elements. So instead of building big fancy cope elements, spending less money and just having, we call them mobile cope elements for the crews that can only spend 15 or 30 minutes, and you have them right there by the cabin as the crew passes through. So you can still do some programming, but not have to take them all the way out to the course. Okay, so better facilities use, knowing what our resources are, like the yurts, and Chase Cal, yeah. So looking at bouldering versus all the expenses that go into harnesses and ropes and setting up a course, and the qualified staff supervision at Chase Cal. So moving that programming to the bouldering. And then also, Santa Claus was another one that I identified immediately, the potential there when we lost Harlan. In my head, I'm like, great, we have this cabin just sitting out in the woods. It's in fairly good shape. Let's go ahead and use that until the next step appears. And so using Santa Claus was my idea, but building a reloading shack was not my idea. I think given more responsibility, I'd take a lot closer look at some of our hastiness in building the buildings. And so maybe just looking at closer at a return on investment, the cost analysis, the participant experience. Is there another way we can do reloading without building something? Opportunities there, or maybe it is worth it. But in that case, I felt like we built it without. I mean, we knew our long-term trends was the shrinking market, so we knew that we were going to lose participants, and we didn't fully know that our water was going to be reliable at Santa Claus yet. So there's a couple things that we've done like that I think with a level of higher responsibility and my experience and my ability to look at trends over time, I would just look a lot closer at some of those big costly decisions that cost year after year, even after you build them. Not just your facilities, but also your existing infrastructure. So as we had our bigger crew loads in the 2019 season and the bigger crews that were in our immediate future, knowing the taper was probably going to come later, but knowing immediately we're still trying to get through all the crews that were burned out and COVIDed out, identifying opportunities for trail camps that didn't require a lot of payroll and investment in infrastructure and trail building and things that we could put into place more or less immediately. But it's a win-win on a lot of levels. So Line Camp and Touch Me Not are two of the examples I come to often because they already had existing trails to those spots. They were very close to road access, where all you had to do was just regrade the road or clear the road. The old logging roads. They were very proximal to water sources, so existing water sources. So trail, water, roads, beautiful scenery, by the way, pulled the population of hikers out of the main corridor and thoroughfare. So you're using more of the back country, you're under the elevation limits of all these. Lots of win-win, lots of doing more with less there. So not just looking at your facilities that are in place and utilizing those better, but then also your program supplies and also your infrastructure that may have been forgotten about. And so I know a lot of the trails and roads that we don't use, because that was a lot of my pastimes at Philmont, is finding those and hiking those. So knowing where those are and how we can better use them. So long story short, just coming back to the camps and the programs and the plans for our usage and safety identification and usage over time and finding the growth opportunities and the cost reductions really comes back to this 5-year plan goal and engaging the CDs and the BCMs in this 5-year plan, because they are the ones that's going to be able to tell us, is the program effective? And one thing that I did is every day I reviewed the evals of the crews, and I parceled all those out and I put them in the digital camps for the camp directors the next year. And so they had all the feedback from the previous summer. So understanding the impact of the program, but that's a lot to do for one person alone. And so engaging the local experts that have boots on the ground for the 5-year plans, but there's some that were easy for me to identify when I was there. So ATVs was one. My first year, I was responsible for that. I quickly saw the cost of the ATVs, the maintenance, the training, the staff cost of having to have 21 and up staff, the staff cost serving the crew. So you're looking at your staff hours per participant. The fact that we couldn't even serve all the participants because there was the age minimum there. So underserving our customers, understanding how it relates to our brand identity. And I know that Philmont was kind of on the hook from national to make that program successful. But coming back and looking at it, 2018, we were up for renewing that ATV program, and I proposed that we go ahead and discontinue it. I think three years later, it was finally discontinued. But just that, and then the daily near miss reports from that camp director, and I'm really glad he submitted those because it just gives you a better understanding of the risk there as well. So ATVs was an easy one. Mountain biking is one that I'm going to take a closer look at. I mean, that's one of our higher risk programs and higher cost programs. You're looking at occurrence of incident, and then the potential injury. So if it's at mountain biking, you're having a high occurrence of minor injuries, and there is more occurrence of major injuries in mountain biking. I mean, the head injuries. Anytime you crash and you hit your helmet, you got to get assessed and you got to retire the helmet. And so mountain biking, it is a high impact program. You do make some really great experiences with that program. You change lives. It's a really cool program that fits within our image, and we have some great infrastructure there. But responding to that program, if you have to go up there for a medical emergency, I mean, it's one of the farther away camps. It's certainly a more expensive camp, not just in regards to the bikes, but your helmets, which have an expiration, your maintenance cost, your staff cost. You have to have a higher staff ratio there. And so just understanding, I think the return on investment's there, but it's understanding that we write it down. So we have it written, we know what it is, look at our 5-year plan. We had looked before about duplicating the North mountain biking. I suggested replacing ATV with the mountain bikes, because then you have better use of a single inventory and inventory rotation and training. But whether we keep the program or not, seeing an opportunity there I call it the pipeline promotion, and promoting, Summit does a lot with bikes. And so maybe that's just an opportunity to have some promoting our brothers and sisters in high adventure, and just mention that Summit has, do you really like this mountain bike? Oh, by the way, look at Summit next year. Crew's getting this sort of 3-year cycle, and you want them to come back to Philmont. And so pushing Summit maybe for the next year, and then come back to Philmont after that. Mountain bikes, horses is another one that's a high risk. That's out of the back. I mean, that's in the ranching department, but once again, just looking at the return on investment there and the risk. And then finally, when you are ready to buy program supplies, buying exactly what you need. So when I was at Philmont, I had a couple of big purchases. One of them was a capital purchase of $130,000 for bear resistant containers. All the containers that we use for crew food in the base camp, the capital had already been approved, so we had to spend it no matter, we just had to spend it. And the debate of whether or not to do this had already been done. So it was just my job to carry out the purchasing. But I took dozens of photos, I filled in bags of food, and I laid them up and I measured them, and I researched options, and I reached out to previous chief rangers, and I reached out to the company, and we talked about different roof styles, and understanding that crews are probably going to end up putting a lot of trash in these things. How do we manage that? So spending, when we do decide to make a purchase, making sure that we are spending our money wisely. That's our fiduciary responsibility as a camp director. If we are not spending money wisely, then I just think about the kid and them having to spend their money to go on this trip. And if they're giving me $130 to come here, I want to make sure and do as much as I can with that $130 per day, which I think is a 12-day per person fee. So that was one example. Another one, and I've talked about it a couple of times, is just this Cabela's example. And when you do get a donation, being able to spend that donation to the maximum benefit, and being able to go back to that donor and say, hey, your donation, we took it as far as we could. You have made the biggest impact possible with this donation. And here's a thank you note, by the way. Here's a thank you note from all the kids that used your gear. Give us more money. But the Cabela's came in. I talked to like 6 different camp directors. I found out the exact things that we need, comparing different options, being able to increase our capacity of program at the fish camp, which we knew was a pinch point coming up. So getting these nice vices, which was a common complaint for customers. I looked at previous evals, using that purchase as wisely as possible. But I did bring this up just because we also bought some winter fishing gear. So we spent quite a bit of money, $3,000 overall, on things like a fish finder and these fishing houses and all this fishing gear for the winter season. And so this goes back to a comment I made on the video and looking at second season programs. And in this case, I'm not saying that this wasn't of value. I didn't do the cost analysis on this, but it was part of the request for the donation, so I went ahead and added it. But to this day, I still wonder when I come into this job, I'm going to look a lot closer at our second season programs and where we're spending money and things like that. Is how much money are we spending per participant or per use of this gear? Are we getting our money's worth? Whereas this $3,000 might serve a couple people every once in a while, or can it serve thousands of people every single summer? And so we just got to understand the cost of all of our programs and how we can better utilize our money. And so that's sort of one example of a goal of mine. Once again, the 5-year plans, and talking about the program creep. Every time you want to add program, looking at asking the questions: is it improving safety? Is it improving the customer experience? And knowing what the customer experience means. So looking at the quantitative data, the evals every single day, the near miss reports, being able to justify your program creep, your efforts to deliver more program against the quantitative data as well as the qualitative data. So the parking lot discussions after the advisor meetings, the Facebook group comments that you see on the Facebook groups, the discussions you have with customers and staff and advisors in your Suburban as you're driving in and out of the backcountry. That's all really important for understanding if this really cool program. I like geology a lot, but I always have to temper my urge to add more geology, knowing that it's got to not have a lot of cost and have an impact. And so understanding it that way. And like I said, equal quality program across all camps. And not to criticize Metcalf, I think that was definitely a worthwhile project. It had a lot of donor funding, so it doesn't necessarily cost a lot of money, but being able to recognize the potential impact for crews and how their experience might, if you have Metcalf and then a program that is historically, like Metcalf to Dan Beard. Well, Dan Beard it's an aging camp. The cope is good for what it is. We're not having these super fancy cope things like the zip lines at Summit. The cope is meant to develop a crew's communication and teamwork. But if they're going from Metcalf with these super nice buildings and things like that to Dan Beard, well, the first 30 seconds is you're gonna taint their image and their whole experience maybe based on that first 30 seconds. And so understanding the itineraries and the crew's itinerary from camp to camp, and then the first 30 seconds at each camp, and making sure that we are having a consistent level of quality throughout all camps. So focusing our resources on improving camps that are underperforming without adding a lot. There's a lot of camps out there that have had a lot of resources pushed to them, and I think it's now time to look at all the camps. Not just equal quality of the programs, but also equal quality of the different trek durations. So your 12-day treks, your 9-day treks, your 7-day treks, and your PTC backcountry experiences all need to deliver the same quality of Philmont experience that we promise to everybody. So making sure that you have an equal quality of program to all those treks as well. And then also maintaining your quality for the trek literature. So before they arrive, that is part of your first impression that crew has of Philmont. So one of the efforts I had when I was there was looking through the guidebook to adventure and going through the council unit and planning guide, and finding a lot of duplications, finding a lot of inconsistencies. What can we add to one or the other? Do we need both documents? Looking at all of our crew pre-arrival literature and promotions and everything like that, just to make sure that it's all consistent. It answers the questions, and it has what the crew is looking for. It doesn't have typos, for example. And I talk about a couple things that I noticed in the itineraries, and once again, it's not something that I'm 100% sure, but there were some things that I'm pretty sure were just like typos. And so catching those, knowing that directly impacts our credibility with our customers, and our customers are very forgiving and supportive on Facebook and all that, but it's a slippery slope once you start letting that slide. So I did a lot of that when I was there, and I would continue those efforts, just knowing that word of mouth is our biggest recruitment marketing that we can do. And so And so word of mouth is both, could be really good for us, but it could also be really damaging if we're not careful. And so making sure that the word of mouth is working in our favor and not against us. Just other random cost savings. Vehicles is a big one. I've talked about them and safety, but identifying where are we using our vehicles. It's a huge expense for us, not just the vehicle and the maintenance. We always lose a vehicle or two during the summer just due to on the job needs and going through water or rocks or whatever. The maintenance, the full-time staff involved with that, the risk, the road conditions. So looking at all our vehicles, waste removal is a big function of our vehicles in the summer. Is there a way that we can better remove waste from the backcountry to reduce our drives? And when I was there, we looked at the idea of adding dumpsters to Poniel. So I worked with Ray Hayden in the maintenance department and looked at the cost there. But more garbage capacity in the backcountry, or bigger garbage removal vehicles, or having the crews, looking at the itineraries, maybe the crews carry garbage to a more convenient location. And so waste removal is one. Commissaries is another one, not just for waste removal, but the food deliveries. Understanding that you can go to PJ about twice in the same amount of time that it takes to go to Apache Springs. And so when you're doing the itineraries, if you can use PJ without overwhelming it or providing poor quality itineraries, always use PJ for your commissaries, because the staff time, the vehicle use, there's lots of benefits to using PJ over Apache Springs. Water buffaloes, I know we're using them a lot. Looking at our itineraries, how can we better utilize our existing water sources without relying on all these water buffaloes? I mean, that's a high risk deal. I mean, not just the vehicle, but now you're hauling a ton of weight in the vehicle, the trailer cost, the road conditions, and people need water, so you got to get it there. And if the road's bad, you're stuck up a creek. Water quality, the visual appearance of being in the backcountry and having to go to a plastic container for your water. So the customer experience, the driver safety. So water buffaloes, just taking a closer look at that, see if there's opportunity there. The gather and scatter of camps, and to the scatter and gather specifically of staff. But looking at our gather and scatter schedule, can we better utilize vehicles, or I'm sure it comes up every once in a while, but just considering, are there off-season storage opportunities at our backcountry camps, so we don't need to gather as many resources in the field or scatter as many? And I think that we'll still come to the same answer, but I think every once in a while, every few years, let's take a look at the resources out there and just consider how we might go about having more. Do you put a regional Connex box somewhere in a convenient location and to house off-season program storage, and just put things in there that you're not going to need? It's not like inventory critical or whatever the case may be. And then that's less vehicles and less gear. I mean, every time you're transporting gear further, that's when you break more gear or lose more gear. And then as we're gathering the camps, maybe the commissary trucks, as they're making their last deliveries, they can fill up on program supplies and bring those back. So just looking at scatter gather, how we can streamline there, looking at other options. Staff end dates at the end of the summer, there's always surprise end dates. And I talk about this in my $50,000 idea in a different video, but just looking at our end dates and how we can better confirm our end dates and verify them, and not have all these daily trips in the backcountry to pick up staff and their stuff every single day to every single camp in the backcountry. It's just huge vehicle demands in the backcountry on your final days of the summer. And finally, infirmary needs. So that's probably the number one need in the backcountry, is just the infirmary, and using those vehicles, making sure that they have the vehicles they need. But then also this is more of an infirmary topic, but once again, collaborating and teamwork across departments is do it for minor injuries. Is it easier to reroute the crew if it's a minor ankle sprain? Maybe make it an automatic 2-day layover at that camp or a nearby camp. just to give that participant more time to really consider their choice. I mean, I think with longer time, the participant has a chance to be firm with their decision or more assessment. I mean, I don't know how many times, you know, I see this, you pull into a camp and all of a sudden everybody has a stomach ache. So giving them more time in the field to really decide if they want to commit to the trek. You know, that "we all made it" sign, the sign that's in the background of my photo, that really does have a lot of meaning for crews. And I think that sometimes our participants regret their decision to come off trail for a minor injury. And I know for me, when I was a participant, there was one time I had the wrong boots and I had blisters and I had bloody heels at the end of my trek. But gosh darn it, I made it, and I don't regret it. It took me a long time to heal from that, but it just made me a better person, and now I'm so grateful for that. So infirmary needs, do we have a reroute to where we just give them fewer miles per day? And is it easier to reroute their itinerary, which can be pretty tricky, or does it an automatic like 2-day layover while we assess the situation? And that's all, of course, for non-emergent cases or whatever the case may be. But that's something to look at, is the drives for the infirmary cases. And I know some efforts have been made there in the last couple of years. So that's the vehicle cost. And then number one with the vehicles is just your safety costs. So the safety cost, or the cost of being unsafe, I guess. You know, prevention is key. That safety culture, it all starts with the hiring and the training, and knowing that the job descriptions say safety officer is their number one duty. The training, talking about porch talks and how to identify safety issues in the field. So you're minimizing the cost of being unsafe, where now it's an emergency and you have to expend a lot of resources to go help somebody. Prevention is key. So identifying those minor things before they become major things. Training staff to look out for staff. I mean, when you're in the climbing training, you learn that if you look at the incident reports, what is your number one demographic for the incident reports? And it's the staff. The staff are the ones that become complacent or so confident or fatigued that they are the ones more likely to forget to, you know, to clip on, and then they go to belay and they fall and they break their back. And I know that's happened. And so staff watching out for each other, preventing the cost of being unsafe. That's what the staff end. The camps and the facilities, that all comes to your pre and post camp inspections, your CFET, the camp facilities evaluation tool for the NCAP, but also tooling those camp directors and having the digital camps available for those camp directors to know the history of their camp, the maintenance history, the maintenance maps, the water systems, you know, so that they're not getting everybody sick really quickly because they put too much chlorine or not enough chlorine in the water. So your pre-camp, post-camp, and your facilities support their documentation. Quality staff, like I mentioned, your returning staff, the better training, getting them early training. So not making them do the training before they arrive in the summer, but having it available in case they want to go above and beyond and do that in their free time at their fingertips. The job descriptions, the porch talks, the mutual safety checks between the staff, and that safety culture. The backcountry staffing levels. So do you have enough staff, or do you have the program that doesn't require as much staff, so now your staff are not being overworked or fatigued, or you know, when they go on a hasty, they have other things available for the crews, so they don't feel compelled to offer that program early the next. You know, I talked about in the previous one, we went on a hasty at Clear Creek, and it lasted until 4 a.m. And I told the staff, if you are supposed to be shooting people, but shouldn't be shooting people, but if you're supposed to be offering firearms programming the next morning at 8, go ahead and don't offer that for safety reasons. But having the other programs available so that you can make that call and not put your staff, you know, they are people pleasers, are in it for the mission, and they will go above and beyond past their failure point to make that happen. And that's our fault. We're doing them a disservice by not preparing them for that. So staffing levels, and then having the program meet the need and have the flexibility for different staffing levels. And I talked about the roving prospectors earlier, and using them more effectively for safety reasons. Itinerary management, I've talked about this in the itineraries and other areas, but just managing the itineraries, making sure that crews are not hiking on the road, which some of the itineraries right now, they incentivize crews hiking on the road. Hiking in the heat, and I talked about that with a couple itineraries for this upcoming summer, where they offer program like horseback riding or sports action shooting in the morning of a hike, a long hike that's uncovered that day. And so now crews are hiking in the heat. So identifying the potential costs of being unsafe within the itineraries, forcing crews to hurry up to their next camp, like from Bobby Inn to Miners Park, so they can get on the climbing schedule. You're forcing them to get up super early and skip out on the Trail Peak programming and go to Miners Park. So they're more likely just to leave garbage on the front porch. I know some crews, they feel like that's an expectation that they should have. They feel owed. So if the staff decides that that's a problem, so they don't offer that service to crews where they have a trash can for crews in the morning, then crews are still likely to leave garbage on the front porch, and now you're dealing with animals. So safety issues with that, and that all comes back to the itineraries. And then utilizing your agents in the field. So like I said, I have one radio, I have 2 ears and 4 eyes, and I can only see so much. So using your backcountry managers effectively in the morning meetings, start with the safety issues first. So what are they identifying as safety issues? What do we need to jump on quickly? And what are they doing to build that culture within their camp directors? Capture that feedback, share the crew feedback, and using them as agents in the field, and using the camp directors and the whole structure of the backcountry to effectively deliver the safety message. And then also, yeah, just using your backcountry managers in the field to identify program facility needs, the growth, the potential growth and savings opportunities, and all that. So, and then finally capturing that progress from year to year through those digital resources, engaging the camp directors and telling that camp that this is their legacy project. I mean, this is a way for you to leave a name and develop a camp for the long haul. So, you can have a legacy project where you just put a bunch of rocks somewhere and it's a nice seating area or fire ring, and that's one thing. But if you really want to leave a legacy, building those digital camp resources and advancing your emergency action plans, and you're being more strict on your NCAP standards and your facilities, and adding photos that will help the next camp staff know what the water system is like, and your AOR. That progress capture is how you really advance. And then you also have better continuity and succession planning in our day and age, as we see more succession year after year. We're having less 3, 4, 5 year seasonal staff and more turnover in the full-time staff. The succession planning is so critical for these digital resources and digital camps. So all that comes back to safety primarily, and then the added benefits from there. All right, the last thing I want to talk about is just coming back to that $50,000 idea, and then talking about maybe a couple just big opportunities. I bring it up here. So the $50,000 idea, yeah, here it is. Okay, so I'll just share this real quick. Once again, just talking about scalable staff, but the win-win situation here is I took a look in I don't know, 2018 or 19, scaling our backcountry and having a strategic closing gather of the backcountry, and using the itineraries to do this, but understanding that our South Country can handle a certain amount of crews, like 30 crews, I think was the number that I came up to after looking at campsite capacities, your program capacities, your daily crew loads, backdating your taper at the end of the season, and then shutting down the North Country strategically so that you can there's lots of benefits here. So you can schedule all your staff that have earlier end dates in the North Country, and then they're coming out of North Country, so your staff are better gathered at the end of the season. You're able to gather those camps on a better timeline, so you're not having to send out as many resources to gather. The savings, between payroll and things like that, is over $50,000 And that's a conservative estimate. And yeah, it has these benefits, and I talk about it in another video, but just safety, program quality, the maintenance and roads, the vehicle traffic and the miles driven, all these are great benefits. But perhaps the biggest benefit to, and you could probably get about 2 weeks out of this, depending on the year, but the bigger benefit is not just the $50,000 cost savings. You're now carving out a piece of the summer, which is your your biggest asset is your land, and the summer is when your market is available. In the off season, we're really struggling to, what can we do? What are some creative ideas? And you're just trying to cover your costs in the off season. And so a lot of our off season programs is just to tread water. And in the summer is when you can really have these huge opportunities. And so being able to close half of your backcountry 2 weeks early in the summer, you've now opened up, and the BSA, like I said, from 3 million to 1 million over the last 20 years. So being able to market to more opportunities for outside the BSA, and I think I mentioned this in a different video, but huge growth potential there. But the last thing, and so that was an example of a win-win, cost reduction, growth opportunity. One other sort of idea that I just had just before this video was kind of looking at, and the main reason for the closing the backcountry was more so seeing a problem and trying to fix a problem. So just having to deal with all these staff end dates and your camp staff minimums in the backcountry, your emergency response, and that was just a huge safety issue. And so trying to mitigate that, and then the cost savings was just a secondary benefit to that. So the win-win opportunities, and I was thinking about this just before this meeting, but what is a big barrier that our customers have, and a barrier that is growing, by the way, that our customers have to reserving a crew, or once they book a crew, to getting the training and the pre-qualifications they need to come here and work it out. And so if you're thinking about it, and you talk to customers, I mean, I know for Maine High Venture, this is a big thing, and I remind crews very ahead of time and multiple times, the wilderness first aid requirement is such a hassle for crews, and they have to go find a wilderness first aid course. They have to make sure it's compliant. They have to schedule it into their busy schedules. It has a cost associated with it, and they have to, oh, by the way, get 3 people out of their crew to get this requirement. So that's an issue. That is a barrier to customers signing up for Maine High Venture. And then it's an issue for us to have to deal with at Philmont. You have the wrong training, or did they do all the online course and they didn't do the blended course or the in-person course? And so there's definitely some negative effects there. Well, and like I said, whenever you're brainstorming ideas, it's easy to close the door immediately, but let's keep the door open a little bit for this idea, because I think it's worth exploring. Say, for example, you have a opportunity for crews to arrive 1 day early and get their wilderness first aid course done 1 day early. So for customers, you can try to get new markets for more customers. You can try to bring customers back more often. You can try to get more customers per crew, so you're flattening out your fixed costs, or you can try to get your same customers for a little bit longer. And so by offering wilderness first aid on arrival, and there's some risk there. What if they don't pass wilderness first aid? Well, you can minimize the risk by offering the blended course. So if they pass the online portion of wilderness first aid, they're a lot more likely to pass the second part of that course. By offering it to the whole crew or nobody, so the whole crew arrives early, and so now you're hedging your bets with just 3 people in the crew need to pass the course. And I know different companies have different age minimums. So I think Red Cross has a 14-year-old minimum for their wilderness first aid. So do you offer wilderness first aid through Red Cross? Or maybe they just don't get certified, but that's part of the deal. They have to attend the course. Maybe they get trained and they don't get the certificate. That's not a bad thing either. But the whole crew now takes the wilderness first aid training. And now the whole crew is better trained. So they're getting the message that Philmont wants to deliver, so that Philmont's focusing on the more Philmont things that they need to know. They get to training right before they go on trail, so it's fresher in their mind. And oh, by the way, there's a huge revenue growth opportunity here. So they come in for a day early. They fill the vacancies in the PTC. You know, PTC can sometimes be hard to fill, and so maybe you offer this 1 day early program to the PTC. It starts them acclimatizing to the elevation sooner. So now the crew can hit elevation earlier in their trek. And it keeps their money in-house. Before they're trying to find these courses and they're paying money to outside vendors, and now it keeps the money in Philmont. So yeah, it's no loss for them. They pay somebody else or they pay Philmont, and now they get to say like, oh, I was trained at Philmont Scout Ranch, my wilderness first aid, or you know, instead of wilderness first aid, maybe it's Philmont first aid. Maybe we don't use Red Cross or something like that. We keep our fixed costs to a minimum, not having to purchase their supplies. Maybe Philmont provides the training and has the approval through whatever we need to provide a Philmont in-house training. And now our fixed cost of program materials are a lot lower. So the Philmont first aid training, for example, and now all of a sudden Philmont is the largest wilderness first aid trainer in New Mexico or the country, because now we're training thousands of people in wilderness first aid. So yeah, there's some definitely some things to figure out. There might be some very black and white, like this is not going to work, but noticing the potential benefits, seeing it from lots of different angles for benefits, and understanding that it's a huge barrier to crews getting on board. And yeah, there is a lot of safety benefits, but let's just quickly, I'm going to pull up a spreadsheet here, and let's just run some numbers. I love doing this. So just like hypotheticals, I love running the hypotheticals. You always try to let's see, over when you're dealing with budgets, you always try to put a little buffer into your expenses. So maybe over guess the expenses by 10% or more, and then under guess your revenue by 10% or more. So I love playing with numbers and hypotheticals, and then I always put sort of a safe margin, just because. And if I hadn't done this at Maine High Adventure, we would have been up a creek, because you know, fuel prices and food prices just skyrocketed, and that's why I've increased the fees there by like 40% in the last 3 years. But okay, so you know, over the course of a summer, Philmont probably has maybe 1,500 total crews, plus or minus. Let's say there's maybe 10 participants per crew. The average wilderness first aid course, I think last time I looked, was for Red Cross blended course, and it was $175. That included your program supplies. I don't think it included lodging, so that'll be just the fee for WUFA or the Philmont first aid. By the way, save those fixed costs, and that equals, you know, that's a 1 extra day for them. They get this really cool certification and experience, and the added benefits of acclimatization and things like that. And the fee is the same as they pay. Like I think a 9-day fee per day is about $175 per person per day. So it's not a huge exorbitant cost to them. If anything, they're saving money because they don't have to transport to some special course in the off season that they've had to take work time off for, or something like that. So they're really saving money. I mean, you could charge them more than this, because the convenience of them being able to do this the day before their trek has a lot of added cost savings for them. But we'll just stick to 175. And then let's just say, you know, only 10% of your crews sign up for this. So I think that's a very safe guess. But I think it could be a lot more than that. So 10% would probably be 2 to 4 crews per day. But when you're talking about numbers in PTC, that's you know, maybe roughly 30 to 40 participants per day, and then you have a staff person or two, I mean, dedicated to this. So let's see. So equals 15 total crews times 10 participants times $175 per participant times 10% of your overall participant. $262,000 So as we're doing a cost analysis and the risk of this and understanding everything, it's important to keep these figures in mind, because as we're thinking outside the box, this is where our biggest growth is going to be, is thinking outside the box. So, just say 20% of our crews do this, and I think it could easily be this once it catches on. I mean, maybe all of our crews do it, but it quickly gets into the $500,000, $1 million range. So just by offering that wilderness first aid, it has safety benefits, it has customer service benefits, and huge revenue potential for Philmont. So that's just one example of identifying a problem and trying to fix the problem, but in a way that's like a win-win situation. So so in summary, just understanding that I am a program person at heart. My heart and soul are in the backcountry, but I'm a numbers focused person because that's my responsibility to make sure that our people can do what they need to do to change lives. And I'm a product of the program. And so once again, music, burros, and mine tours. Burros are my favorite program because it teaches you, I think there's a metaphor for people there. Burros teaches you that you can give a burro a carrot, you can give a burro a stick, but sometimes a burro is just going to do what a burro wants to do. And so for people, you can use honey, or you can use different methods for trying to incentivize them. But sometimes people are just going to be people. And so I love the burros because it teaches people at a young age just that sort of lesson. And like I said, mine tours, that's why I became a geologist. So once again, that's just a brief summary of the summer program, growth potential, cost reduction, and my mindset between some of the things that I'm keeping in mind over the short term, as well as the long-term benefits to Philmont. So once again, thanks for joining me. And I think we have a huge opportunity here for growth.